PR Connections Radio presents Ethics Realty is a full-service real estate agency that provides a service for finding the ideal property for residential, commercial, and investor-centered clients. Whether you're a first-time buyer or a seasoned buyer or investor, they provide service to all and listen to understand your goals and needs. For more information about their wealth and investment-centered services, call 702-518-1606 or visit their website, ethicsrealty.net.
Welcome to the Real Deal Podcast. I'm your host, Davin Sedgwick. Today, we're going to be going over how to make massive money in real estate or massive income in real estate. Just in case you're not a fan of the show or you're brand new to the show, we just went over the 5 ways to make money in real estate. And we specifically didn't go in depth on how to make massive income in real estate because we felt like it deserved its own episode really urgently. And so I wanted to use this time to be able to take a deep dive into how to make massive income in real estate. Now, if you type that into a search result, you are going to find a plethora of gurus out there who want you to use their system in order to make money in real estate, which is fine. What I'm going to do in this video is go over an overview on how all of those different systems work. That way you can choose the right strategy that's going to work for you. So without any further ado, last time we went over our sponsors for the episode at the very end. And today I do want to tell you that Robinhood and Webull both sponsor these episodes. You can go down, use the links in the description below to get free stocks when you're doing your investing, because there's no better way after you make some massive income is to go make some passive income in your own brokerage account or even a Roth IRA. We are not an investment services company, so I am not a financial advisor, so do not take this as financial advice. All right, let's jump into the first segment of understanding massive income in real estate. There are 3 main categories that we can put massive income into. One is control, the second is use, and the third is value add. Now, you might find an activity that covers 2 of those 3 or even all of those 3, and those are, of course, the best. And I'm going to give you an example that I personally implemented into my own home to use all 3 of those concepts for creating massive income. Now, first one is control. Control is the ability to do things in a business that is unrelated to real estate, but occurs on a piece of property. What does that mean? Well, essentially, think of it this way. If you own a car washing business, it doesn't matter if you wash the cars at people's houses or at your own commercial real estate or at your own house. At some point in time, those cars, the activity of washing those vehicles, and the storage of the equipment that it takes to wash those vehicles have to be stored on some kind of piece of real estate that can be measured as a real cost to running the business. So what's great is owning your own piece of real estate gives you the ability to control that property and use it in a way that's most profitable for you. When you don't own that real estate, you're essentially under the control of a landlord. And that landlord is, of course, under control of city ordinance. So by owning your own property, you get to remove a layer of governance over how you can operate your business. This allows you to adjust to market conditions and attract customers that are favorable and profitable to your business. So, of course, landlords are going to have their own rules on top of their property. And yes, you do need to follow state and local laws. But landlords are always going to have stricter rules on how you can use their property than how the state is ordinanced. So it does help you create a wider variety of freedom in how you can operate your business and make money if you own the piece of property that your business is operating on. Next is use. Use is pretty much very similar to control, but you're doing this on a residential piece of real estate. And how use differs from control is use is more of a replacement for renting somebody else's property for a personal use rather than just a business use. And I'll give you an example here, right? You want to buy a dog, but your landlord doesn't allow pets above 40 pounds. Buying a home gives you the opportunity to use the home how you want to, right? So that's not necessarily an exact financial benefit. You're not running a dog sitting business necessarily on this property, but you don't get to use the property in a way that you can control. Now you might say, how does having a dog affect my pocket? Well, it doesn't necessarily affect your pocketbook instantly, right? But that's just one example of a use case that's not financial, but it is a way that you use your property that is controlled by a landlord, right? But let me give you just kind of a secondary example is you invest $2,000 to start a garden in your backyard and you save $400 a month on groceries. Well, that does actually help your pocketbook. Eventually, there is a point where you have a payback, right? Where you benefit from that enhancement of the property, right? But how this differs from control is you're not selling these vegetables and making a profit. You're just simply eliminating a bill that you would currently pay, right? Maybe you spend $1,400 a month on groceries and now you're only paying $1,000, right? So you're using the property to its maximum potential. That is an example of use, right? Versus control, right? So it's very similar, but think of use as saving money and think of control as making money. That's the best way to identify use and control. And sometimes we control a property in a way that doesn't necessarily make us money, but it allows us to do what we want to do, and vice versa with use. So there are some overlaps between the two. Now, what differentiates use from value add is, for example, planting a garden does not necessarily increase the property's value when another buyer is looking at that property. Another buyer could go in and say, I don't like apple trees, or I don't like oleander, or I don't like whatever you decided to plant on the property for whatever you liked, right? That's why a garden is more use than a value add. But let's go over an example of something that is undeniably a value add, right? So when the real estate becomes more valuable to other people, other potential buyers of the property. Number one is repairing a defective aspect of the property. And that causes the buyers to desire the property more, right? And there's a wide variety of ways to do that, and we'll go into some examples later. We're just going over what a value add is. The second is increasing the property's productiveness, right? Increasing the property's productiveness might be adding an additional dwelling unit that can be rented out. This increases the total passive income, which increases a buyer's willingness to pay for the property. Now, if you don't remember, passive income was the primary way or the primary reason why most people invest in real estate. Of course, there's 5 main reasons why people invest in real estate, but that's the first one that people focus on. So if you increase the property's ability to increase passive income, you massively increase what people are willing to pay for that particular piece of real estate. So let me just give you an example. If you could rent out a home for $2,400 a month and you decide to move into that property, right? But you decide to build an additional dwelling unit in the backyard, right? And you move a family member into that dwelling unit, and you were going to commit to helping that family member. Maybe they're an elderly relative of yours, and it would have cost you $600 a month to house them somewhere else, or it would have cost you $600 a month more to buy a bigger house that could have housed you and your family. This $600 is an opportunity benefit, right, that you get to receive. And it's an opportunity cost to somebody else who has the exact same needs, wants, and desires that you have. So now your property isn't compared to being able to house 4 people. It's now being compared to a property that can house 5 people, right? And a property that can house 5 people is going to be deemed more valuable, right? Let's just say $3,000 a month versus $2,400 a month. That's a $600 difference. And typically, we can use a gross rent multiplier to understand how much an increase in rent could increase the property's value. this is where we're going to get some really big, massive income here. So if you increase the property's value or rental capacity by $600 a month, that's roughly $7,200 a year, about $7,000, right? If we multiply that by 10, that implies that we have a gross rent multiplier of 10, meaning you take $7,000, you multiply it by 10, that increases the property's value by possibly up to $70,000. Now, if you didn't spend $70,000 building this additional dwelling unit, then that's an absolute win. That means that you made more money on the value increase in the property than what it costs you to increase the property's value. And oftentimes, a gross rent multiplier can be well above 10. Your gross rent multiplier can be as high as 20 in certain markets, not in Las Vegas, but in other markets, which means if you have a gross rent multiplier of 20, that $7,000 increase in rent can actually lead to $140,000 increase in the property's value. Now, in a high interest rate environment right now, you're going to see it a lot closer to 10 than 20. However, 10 times your earning potential is still a lot better than other areas that you can invest your money. So this is a great example of a value add in your real estate. And you can kind of combine use in with that as well. Like in the example that I gave you, if you're having grandma stay in an additional dwelling unit, right? You are personally using the property, but then somebody else is going to use that property for a different reason later. So it's not only valuable to your use, it's also valuable to somebody else's use. That's what makes it a value add on top of it. Okay, I promised you an example of a method that is going to use all three of the topics. It's going to use control, it's going to use use, and it's also going to use a value add. And that combination, for me, creates massive income on my piece of real estate because I'm all about practicing what I preach. Now, you don't have to do this exact method. In my opinion, I think everybody has their own unique opportunities, and you need to find ways that utilize real estate for you the best way possible. But I'm just going to go into my example first. First, I'm going to grab a drink of water. Okay, so in my business, I was paying rent, right? And I was renting an office as well as operating in my own home. So I needed a home office, and then I needed to set up my computer in order to virtually log into my actual office. And then I actually had to visit my real office every once in a while to make sure that things were functioning properly. And this to me seemed really inefficient. And I was watching the way the real estate market was going. And I said, you know what? I need to prepare my business to be as efficient as possible because we're going to have a slowdown in real estate. And in that time, I want to be saving as much money as possible on rent. So then that way I could allocate that capital towards other productive things that my customers are going to value. So essentially, I said, you know what? My rent for my office was going to be $400 a month. And it was about getting ready to increase to $500 a month. So that estimates about $6,000 a year. I built a office in my backyard with my own two hands. I looked up the city codes, make sure that I followed all of the guidelines, and I made sure that I built a property that was also up to the guidelines of state law as far as what is considered to be a home office in the state of Nevada. So I was compliant with the state law, but then I was also making sure that the property was compliant with city law as well. And so built my own office, right? And that cost me roughly $10,000, right? About $5,000 for the building and materials, and then about another $5,000 for the air conditioning and electrical system to be installed. So now I have a self-sufficient office that has electrical, it has computers, it's got Wi-Fi and internet, and I'm able to operate my real estate business out of my home. So I did two things, right? Now I have a better control of my time because I run my real estate business out of my house. That time savings allows me to do things in my business to make more money. So that's an example of control. I have better use of my residence because I actually use that office for multi-purpose. I use it to not only store my real estate business, but I also store some personal items in that office that I was storing in my house when I had a home office and an actual physical location elsewhere, right? So now I'm able to consolidate my personal and my business all in one. So that's use and control. And then value add, I am also adding value to the next person that purchases this home. You see, I live in a very small home, which means that storage space is at a premium. So the next person that owns this home after me, they're going to benefit from not having to purchase a storage unit. So I'm going to make more money while I live here. I'm going to save money while I live here. And the next person is going to save money while they live here, meaning they're going to pay me more money for this house. It's going to be more competitive. And how I know that is other neighbors in the neighborhood were doing very similar things in their yard. They weren't necessarily building home offices in their yard, but what they were doing is they were building storage sheds in their yard. They were building workshops in their yard. A lot of other people were building storage sheds in their yard. So the fact that my house didn't have one could have made my house less attractive compared to the neighbors' houses. Now my house essentially is able to compete on price with those neighbors' houses and with what they have as well. So those are a way to do one project and have all three things built into one. So great opportunity there to use all of those things for me. All right, let's jump back into the topic as a whole and what you can do and what other people are doing in order to maximize the return on investment in each of these categories. Number one that I want to talk about is sweat equity. This is on the value add side of things. This is when people buy a property that's distressed. They fix it up themselves and then they sell it. Now you can spend money and have somebody else do the repairs, but generally speaking, you're going to make a much larger profit margin if you do the work yourself. And every jurisdiction in the United States allows you to what's called being an owner contractor. Essentially, all owners of real estate are allowed to apply for building permits. Doesn't mean that you can break the law. What it means is you are allowed to follow the law yourself. You are not forced by law to hire a contractor in order to stay compliant. You must follow through with those permits and do them as you say that you're going to do them, but you can owner repair any repair that you deem necessary on your property. You're also liable if those repairs are not done correctly, though. So do keep in mind that you have to do this correctly. But sweat equity is a super powerful way to build equity in your home. And you don't have to do every single job. It's okay for you to be doing job A while you hire job B that you know really takes skills that you can't learn as efficiently or as quickly as it is to hire it out. So that's what that exemption allows you to do. The homeowner contractor exemption always allows you to hire somebody to work for your property as long as they're operating underneath your permit, right? So you can hire a handyman if you have a permit to work for you, but what you cannot do is do work on your property unpermitted and have a handyman do work for you in a way that violates the law. So keep in mind that when you're using sweat equity, there's still ways that you need to still be compliant for this to actually work. If you do repairs on a property in a way that's unpermitted, you essentially did all that work for no extra value because you didn't actually add value to the end client. The end client that wants to buy your home, they want to buy a home that has permitted work done, that's done correctly, right? So if you're going to go that route, make sure you do it the right way. Look up your local county laws or your city laws if you live within city ordinance. All right. The next one is going to be negotiation on fixer-uppers. Now, we talked about doing the sweat equity portion of actually doing the work. Most fixer-uppers are going to be listed for a lower price than a home that's in good repair and good functioning order. But you can do additional negotiations, and you can do it in one or two ways. You can negotiate houses that have already been on market for a long period of time and seeing if those homeowners are willing to let their property go for less than what they're asking for. Or you can go to those homeowners directly before they ever list their property and save them money on real estate commissions or what have you. Now, this is really risky and you have to be a fantastic marketer, but your negotiation strategy is absolutely a part of making massive income in real estate. Most successful home buyers typically allow their real estate agent to do this for them. And in my opinion, if you hire a good real estate agent, it should pay for itself, right? Whatever your real estate agent is making, they should definitely be able to out negotiate in whatever they're accomplishing for you. And that doesn't necessarily mean a better price. There's multiple terms that are important when you're negotiating a real estate offer, but in totality, the total value that your real estate agent brings to the table, they should be doing. Just remember, if they're doing work, they also get to reap some of the rewards because they're bringing that benefit to you, and it's a massive benefit. The next one is negotiation on urgent buyers. If you are able to fix your property in such a way where it is in high demand or high desirability, right? You get to negotiate that on the buying end too, meaning you negotiate when you buy the property against the sellers, and you negotiate against the sellers when you buy. This is another value add opportunity. Okay. The last one that I'm going to mention is what I like to call quality repairs, right? Just because you do the repairs yourself does not mean they're quality or effective, right? And what I mean by that is I don't necessarily think you have to have the best house on the block. As a matter of fact, that could be a disadvantage for you, but you at least want to be competitive with other homeowners on the block. And what that means is if everybody else has, tile countertops and you have granite, you may not get the benefit of having granite countertops. So it might be an unnecessary expense, which means you invest an extra $3,000 in materials and you don't necessarily get an extra $3,000 back on your purchase price. So that's a loss, even though you did a great job putting in some repairs that are luxury. Luxury and quality are not necessarily always the same thing when it comes to return on investment. So understand you want to keep up with the competition in the neighborhood and you want to update your home. You don't necessarily always have to upgrade your home. And that's going to give you a much better return on investment. Updating versus upgrading. And if you update in a very effective manner versus if you upgrade in a very cheap manner or in a very ineffective manner, you can have granite countertops, but they're installed with horrible build quality because you cut corners. And therefore, you're not necessarily getting all the value that you invested into that repair, which is such a shame, right? So quality repairs. All right. The next thing that I want to go into other than value add is additional dwelling units. Additional dwelling units, in my particular case, like I said, increase the passive income capability of the property. And this is really, really underrated. Now, in most jurisdictions, especially in Henderson, if a person is going to live inside of an additional dwelling unit, it is going to need to be permitted typically. But the permitting process is fairly straightforward and fairly attainable. You might need to work with a contractor in order to comply with the regulations. But if you did what I went out to do, which I built a workshop or a shed, because a person is not living in there full time, it does not require a permit as long as you are building your shed beneath the 200 square foot requirement. You have to follow setback regulations, which are typically 5 to 6 feet in most jurisdictions. I stuck with 6.5 and 7 feet for my setbacks, just to make sure that I was well within guidelines because I didn't want anybody to raise any red flags or questions. So just something to keep in mind out there is additional dwelling units can increase your profitability on your current property. You don't have to move out. And this is a great opportunity, in my opinion, for parents, because if I have an additional dwelling unit, I could rent out to somebody who is a friend of mine. And maybe that friend is somebody I would trust to babysit my children or something. So something to keep in mind is you don't have to always build value inside the home. Look at building value in the land that develops, that surrounds your property as well. But for those of you who are single, or maybe you don't have kids, or maybe you're married, another opportunity is what I like to call house hacking. It's a very popular way for young people to own real estate and sell off the other pieces of area that they are not using in their home. And essentially what it just means is you live in one room and rent out the others to roommates. And you are all sharing on the costs of operating and living in that property, but you get the benefits when the market goes up in value. So essentially, think of it this way. You're living in a home that might cost $2,500 a month, but to you, it only costs $800 a month. And that property might be worth $400,000. It's going up in value proportionate to the market, right? So if the market goes up, the real estate market goes up 5%, you made $20,000. Versus if you lived in a $200,000 condo that just barely met all your needs, you might be paying $1,600 a month. And if the market goes up by 5%, well, that condo might only go up by $10,000. So you can see how by living in a larger property, but using a smaller percentage of it, not only do you pay less monthly in rent, but you also actually get better upside on the gain, on the price appreciation. And the reason for this is an aspect called the marginal value theorem. And what marginal value theorem implies is that one water bottle is way more valuable than two water bottles. Think of it this way. If you were in the desert and you were dying of thirst, how much would you pay for one water bottle? Probably a lot. But if that same jerk tried to offer you a second water bottle for the exact same price, you'd tell them to kick rocks. And the same thing happens in real estate. People are willing to rent a one-bedroom apartment for $1,600 a month in my neighborhood, but you would not rent a two-bedroom apartment for $3,200 a month. And that goes the same with housing as well. Each additional room that you build in a house does not cost proportionately more. And so you can use that to your benefit when you are renting out per room. You're essentially giving them the high benefit of, hey, I only need a bedroom. Great. So you're getting more per square foot in rent than what it's costing you to essentially own and live in that piece of property. So a huge, huge opportunity for young home buyers out there is what I like to call house hacking. Okay. The next one is going to be in the side hustle culture. I particularly see the growing trend of working from home as an opportunity for people to save a lot of money and make a lot of money, right? So if you can work in a low cost of living area and you can earn the same income by working at a corporation that needs your skills in a high cost of living area, this is a mutual benefit. That company can essentially hire you for less than what they would be able to hire another employee locally at, and vice versa. You get to have additional employment opportunities because you've sectioned off a piece of your home as a professional working environment. Another aspect of this I see being really, really important is in side hustle culture on really local business. Like if you want to start up, I made the car wash example, but if you want to detail cars, there's a huge market for that, right? If you want to be a landscaper, huge market for that. But you're going to have to store these materials somewhere. And it's really difficult to store these materials in your apartment. They have to be stored somewhere, especially if you're doing blue collar work. So I see the side hustle culture in a lot of blue collar jobs are going to be incredibly popular over the next couple of years, especially as AI has taken over a lot of white collar jobs. I do see a swing or a push in the power of our blue collar workers. And what that means is a lot of people who might be working for a company, they might be saying to themselves, you know what, my skills are high in demand. I don't need to work for a company at $25 an hour when I can start my own company and work for $50 an hour. But that increase in hourly wage is not going to come with zero costs. So I do think that these people are going to want to control their own residence and be able to store some of their business tools on their property in order to be able to make more money. So What do you guys think? Comment down below. What do you think are some massive opportunities in order to make money in real estate? I can't cover them all in 30 minutes, but I'm sure you've had some experience watching some videos if you're doing some research on this topic elsewhere that may have been confusing. Hopefully I made it very simple for you, and we'll look forward to watching you, so having you guys watch future podcasts up and coming. The next episode, I want to focus on commercial real estate markets. And that's the reason why I wanted to cover massive income today, is because commercial real estate markets are essentially just a very small subset of how to make massive income in real estate. So appreciate you guys for watching, and have a great day.
Hey, business owners, want to get your brand in front of thousands of locals in Vegas without blowing your budget on overpriced ads? Ready to boost your visibility? Use promo code PRTalk for an exclusive offer. Click the link in the description or contact 702-445-9488 to talk to our experts today. Vegas is watching. Make sure they see you.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.